This is Double Dragon 2: The Revenge for the NES, developed by Technos Japan and released in 1988. I scored a copy of this game with a fantastic label for like $10 a few months back, and it works great. Double Dragon was a popular fighting franchise in the 80s, and it's pretty much a game about walking through a level and button mashing your way to greatness. I reviewed the first game in this series on the NES, and although I did like the game, it certainly had its flaws. And I think Double Dragon 2 does have some things that I might not like, but it certainly feels a bit better than the first one of the series. The biggest differences, I think, are first, they figured out how to make this a two-player co-op game. The first game was really missing that, and they figured it out, so great job. You can also play two-player cooperative, but you can hurt each other, which is also kinda nice. They also have different difficulty levels, and the harder the setting, the more levels that you have to defeat. So when you increase your difficulty, you actually get more gameplay. The game is apparently set in the future, although I can't really see it from the backgrounds that they're using here. There is an introduction story to this one, and to make a long story short, in this version, your girlfriend isn't just kidnapped like in the first game. She is outright killed. So yeah, this is one of those games that doesn't really seem to have a problem with violence against women. And you get to beat up a few along the way too. Wow. I grew up in the 80s. It was definitely a different era. At first, I thought the fighting in this game was a bit strange, the scheme that they use for you to fight. The arcade console, it had a total of 3 buttons you could play with. I think it was punch, kick, and jump. I think that's what we had. But we're limited to only 2 buttons on the NES gamepad, so choices had to be made. We get the A button, the B button, and then you get A and B together. Now, A and B are not divided into punches and kicks like you'd probably expect. Instead, they're just simply the direction of your offense. And it kind of lets you tie multiple attacks to one button. The different moves are going to be dependent on timing, your distance from an opponent maybe, or if you're facing away from them when you press a button. You can also grab opponents and maybe throw or bash them in the head with a knee. To do this, you need to wait until your punches cause them to dip their head, and if they do that, you can press towards them to grapple. Once you have a good grab, you press A or B to finish the move. You can throw or you can knee them in the head. It actually becomes a bit more intuitive after a while, and kneeing these villains in the head is probably one of my favorite things to do in this game. There are a couple of other bigger moves too, like there's a spinning jump kick, and I think there's a big uppercut, but for me, punches and kicks are just the basics for this one, and for an NES game, I think they did a pretty good job figuring out how to give this game some decent variety with only 2 controller buttons, so bravo. There are some limitations with this game, and that is kind of a bummer. I mean, like the first game, we seem to be limited to only have 2 enemies on the screen at one time. I'm guessing this is a sprite limitation with the hardware. I'm guessing. Also, the weapons that the enemies drop, they disappear after that enemy that dropped the weapon is defeated. For me, it kind of makes the weapons almost useless. And I also find them getting in the way of me playing this game sometimes. If I'm bashing my buttons trying to smash somebody while I'm up close, and they happen to have a weapon that they drop, I can't really press my attack because instead of throwing a punch, I will just suddenly stoop over to pick that weapon up. I am not a fan of that happening, and it has gotten me ruined in a couple of fights, and it's a little frustrating. You do get bosses and mini-bosses like all good fighting games of this style, and sometimes they're in the middle, but usually they're at the end of levels. Although, I don't always understand exactly what's going on. Like, one of the first bosses you run into is this guy that, once you beat the crap out of him, he raises his hands to the sky and disintegrates. I don't know why. And then he reforms, and you have to fight him some more. I guess it's an interesting skill to have. Maybe it's fun at parties. I don't know. But I have no idea what's going on when a guy disintegrates in front of me. Very bizarre. I think they also did a pretty good job with this game, at least breaking up the levels. The design of the levels, that is. even on one level, it might not always look the exact same the whole way through. I think they do a really good job of keeping things interesting while you're wandering around. I really like that. They also throw in some other unique things along the way, like suddenly there's a helicopter strafing bullets across a rooftop. Well, not something you would expect in a game like this, until you run into it once, of course. Pretty interesting. Or, there's also a level inside a helicopter. And every now and again when you're in there, the helicopter door opens up, and it tries to drag you outside to your doom. If you get knocked down at the wrong time, it might pull you outside the helicopter and you're dead. I mean, preferably you can knock down one of the enemies and watch them get sucked out. That's much more fun. Pretty great. The music is also pretty good. We're talking top-notch 80s NES video game excitement, and it feels pretty solid for a button masher, and there's a decent enough variety where I'm not losing my mind over any one loop. So, great job on the music. I guess overall I'm not exactly sure what it is that makes it so much fun beating all these people up time and time again, but I gotta say it certainly is, and for the $10 I paid for this cartridge, I am super glad it's in the collection. I mean, this is a fun one. Well, that's all I have today for Double Dragon 2, The Revenge for the NES. Thanks for stopping by to take a look, and feel free to like and subscribe to the channel and all that good stuff if you're interested, and thank you for stopping by to take a look. Hope to catch you on another one.